Good morning, everyone. This hearing of the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies Appropriations Subcommittee is now called to order. I'd very much like to thank our witnesses for being here today. From OSD, we have Mr. Paul Kramer performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment. Representing each of the services are Lieutenant General Jason Evans, Deputy Chief of Staff, G9 Installations, Vice Admiral Ricky Williamson, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Fleet Readiness and Logistics, Lieutenant General Charles Sharodi, Deputy Commandant Installations and Logistics, and Lieutenant General Warren Berry, Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, Engineering, and Force Protection. This year, the Department has sent over a budget request of $9.85 billion for the military construction and family housing accounts. That's a 20% increase over last year's request. I am encouraged to see DoD taking seriously the need to invest in its infrastructure, which is the foundation of military readiness. In addition to significant increases to most service accounts, the request demonstrates a clear intent to prioritize quality of life projects for our service members and their families. While the request rebounds from a significant decrease last year, it remains lower than fiscal years 2019 and 2020 and still accounts for just over 1% of the total DoD budget. At the same time, the need for recapitalization of existing facilities and new mission infrastructure continues to grow. Our subcommittee hearing last month highlighted the vulnerable state of many of our aging and outdated facilities. Broadly, this request is a step in the right direction, but we need sustained and dedicated investment over more than just 2 years. The request notably does not include funding for overseas contingency operations, shifting those projects which are part of the European Deterrence Initiative into the base budget, which is a more appropriate place for them. This move is long overdue, and I applaud it. I am encouraged by the Department's increased focus on energy resilience, specifically the Energy Resilience and Conservation Investment Program, or ERSIP, saw a 73% increase over last year's budget. This program, which is a critical resource to improve energy resilience, had been held flat in budget requests for the past decade, relying on congressional increases to address rising demand and more complex and expensive projects. Within this program, there is also a $10 million request for planning and design funds associated with electric vehicle infrastructure upgrades. I have been vocal about the need for the United States to embrace and accelerate electrification, and the Department needs to understand its capacity and plan for its requirements at an installation and at a community level. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses about what the funding request for ERSIP will achieve and whether it's meeting the existing need. I am encouraged by the increase for ERSIP, but I would also note that there are 10 projects on the ERSIP unfunded priority list totaling some $162 million, which may not even account for the full need. So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about the need for these additional projects and the ability to execute them in FY22 should additional funding be provided. While this request includes many positive stories, we also continue to see the negative impacts of the previous administration's decision to raid funding from military construction projects for border wall construction. There are 16 projects that were defunded and are included in the fiscal year 2022 request for Congress to appropriate funding to, again, the cost of these projects is $221 million more than the level at which they were originally appropriated. I understand these projects were anticipating some unrelated cost increases prior to the diversion, but we lost 2 years of trying to tackle those challenges because of the decision to pull funding and stop design, and taxpayers are paying for that now. For example, in my home state, the MQ-9 Formal Training Unit operations facilities at Holloman Air Force Base, originally funded 3 years ago, remains in a dilapidated state, and our airmen have been working in unsafe conditions for far too long. General Berry, I appreciated our conversation on the subject yesterday and look forward to working together to find a solution to this in this fiscal year. I would also call attention to the fact the federal government will need to address critical safety concerns and undertake environmental remediation projects that are now necessary because of some of this construction. I understand that the Department of Defense will likely not be the lead agency for this effort, but I will remain engaged on this front. Lastly, I must note my disappointment that the budget documents do not include FIDEPs. I understand the delays associated with the presidential transition this year, and that it is not your decision to withhold this information, but these lists are truly critical to our ability to conduct oversight, understand the department's planning, and appropriately resource its military construction needs. I hope you'll bring that message back with you after today. And with that, I would recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I also would like to extend a welcome to our witnesses here today. We certainly appreciate your service to our country and look forward to discussing the President's fiscal year 2022 budget request for military construction, family housing, and base realignment and closure for the Department of Defense. This year's budget request of $9.8 billion reflects a 22% increase over the fiscal year 2021 enacted level of $8.1 billion. While that appears to be a large increase, it's worth noting that the fiscal year 2021 was such a low year for MILCON that even with an almost $2 billion increase, this year's budget request is still one of the lowest MILCON requests in recent years. Additionally, this year's request includes $329 million of European Deterrence Initiative projects that in the past would have been part of the OCO request, which has been shifted to the base. More than $1 billion of the budget is made up of increments for previously appropriated projects, and $661 million is to restore deferred projects. This accounts for approximately 22% of the budget request, leaving less for new requirements. Further, large projects continue to take up a greater share of the budget. The increased complexity of facilities needed to support today's weapons systems, combined with multi-billion-dollar recapitalization initiatives, to culminate in large and complex projects. Without a corresponding increase in top line, affordability will continue to decrease as the cost of construction projects continues to rise. This is a recurring theme and a familiar talking point. We have the same discussion year after year, and I'm worried that MILCON requirements will continue to exceed the resources put towards it as the department continues to take risk in infrastructure. The reality is we will likely continue the same discussion with flat or declining top lines anticipated in the years ahead. We need to therefore make progress and realize efficiencies with the MILCON reform efforts being worked by the department and services. This is another frequent talking point and something we point to year after year, but I am not sure that is yet translated to tangible improvements. We need to identify and implement best practices to lower cost, reduce schedule, and ultimately increase project delivery success. I would also like to highlight the disservice we do to ourselves when we do not adequately invest in the sustainment, restoration, and modernization of our existing facilities. While new mission requirements drive the need for new MILCON, replacing existing or failing facilities also drives up requirements. While buildings will eventually exceed their expected life, deferred maintenance and repairs can accelerate the need for major recapitalization in MILCON. More importantly, infrastructure in poor condition takes a toll on the service members that work, train, and live in these facilities. We need to improve our existing infrastructure, not just to possibly reduce future MILCON requirements, but we owe it to our service members and their families to provide safe and secure facilities, from mission-critical facilities to dorms, barracks, and quality of life supporting infrastructure. Our infrastructure is a critical part of our national security and directly contributes to current and future force readiness. We must work smarter and find innovative solutions to deliver facility investments, and with a constrained environment, I look forward to working with the department to achieve this goal. And again, we appreciate your efforts. This is, as I said, this is not unique to this administration. This is something that we face year after year. MILCON has been, and is significantly underfunded. So, again, we look forward to working with you to figure out how we can do more with the dollars that we have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Bozeman, and we'll now turn to the witnesses for their opening statements. Your full written testimony will be included in the record, and you'll each be recognized for 3 minutes to summarize those remarks. And Mr. Kramer, you may start.
Senator, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good.
I think your mic is on.
Okay, good. Thank you. Chairman Heinrich, Ranking Member Bozeman, and distinguished members of this subcommittee, on behalf of myself and my service colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to present the President's fiscal year 2022 budget request for the Department's Energy, Installation, and Environment Program. While my written statement has been submitted for the record, I will highlight a few key areas. Our installations remain one of our primary weapon systems. While we have been able to operate from these bases that afforded us unprecedented power projection capabilities, today the stark reality is that the homeland is no longer a sanctuary. Therefore, we must ensure that our installations are not only postured to support the joint force, but they are resilient against the full range of man-made and natural threats. Our FY 2022 budget request supports our efforts to address mission requirements, ensure service members have a safe and resilient place to live and work, and also begins to address resilience challenges. We are requesting $26.1 billion for military construction and sustainment, restoration, and modernization funding to address critical mission requirements and life, health, and safety concerns within our current fiscal environment. This funding will be used to replace, repair, and modernize facilities to enhance their resilience to climate events and promotes elimination of excess or obsolete facilities. A key focus of this year's budget request is addressing climate change. The changing climate will continue to amplify operational demands on the force, degrade installations and infrastructure, increase health risks to the service members, and require modifications to much of our existing and planned equipment. Extreme weather events are already costing billions of dollars, and those costs are likely to increase. In response to Executive Order 14008, Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad, the Department developed the DoD Climate Adaptation Plan, which will be finalized later this month. The plan identifies 5 key lines of effort. First one, develop a climate-informed decision-making process. Train, test, and equip a climate-ready force. Resilient build and natural infrastructure. Supply chain resilience and innovation, and enhance adaptation and resilience through collaboration. We are also committed to protecting the quality of life of our personnel and families. Our primary focus here is ensuring access to safe, high-quality, affordable family and unaccompanied housing. Our budget includes $1.4 billion to support our worldwide non-privatized family housing inventory, which includes more than 34,000 government-owned and 5,800 leased units. This request also demonstrates our continued commitment to modernizing unaccompanied family housing with more than $477 million requested for 8 construction projects. With regard to privatized housing, the Department continues to prioritize actions that improve the tenant experience and rebuild tenant trust. Our initial phase was predominantly focused on implementing the MHPI Tenant Bill of Rights and the NDA requirements embedded in those rights. The Department has issued all policy guidance necessary to implement all rights at all MHPI projects to date. With few exceptions, all 18 tenant rights are now available. Finally, the Department depends on the resilient delivery of energy. To prepare for peer competition, where even the homeland is contested, the Department is addressing a range of technological, operational, and policy initiatives to enhance the use of energy in warfighting. To that end, we are requesting $4.3 billion in energy investments, including both installation energy and operational energy. This includes approximately $287 million for the ERSIP, as previously discussed. A significant increase over last year's budget reflects our investment in energy systems. We appreciate Congress and this subcommittee's continued support as we work together to provide the best support possible for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, and their families. I look forward to your questions.
General Evans.
Thank you, Chairman.
General, I apologize. Can you pull your mic a little bit closer? I think it's not quite picking up. Edward Williamson.
Chairman Heinrich, Ranking Member Bozeman, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. In conjunction with the other members of the panel, I appreciate the opportunity to provide an overview of the Navy's fiscal year 2022 military construction budget request. On behalf of our sailors and their families, thank you for your continued support to the Navy in its military construction program and our 70 installations around the world, which enable us to strengthen readiness to support and deliver new and more lethal platforms. The Navy's FY22 MILCON budget requests approximately $1.3 billion with 14 projects which optimize Navy installations to enable global logistics and warfighter development, generation, and employment from the shore. The proposed investments are deliberately targeted to slow further degradation of our facilities and to address the existing backlog of facilities maintenance and repair. Our facilities sustainment, restoration, and modernization request of $3 billion will help to improve sustainment of our most critical facilities in support of overall mission readiness. The additional request of $4.8 billion in base operating support allows ongoing focus on critical shore investments to include targeted climate resilience projects. This budget request will help to reduce the backlog, but it will take several years of consistent resourcing to achieve full recovery. Finally, in support of our sailors and family, the Navy is committed to improving our privatized housing program through regaining the trust and reinforcing oversight and exercising active leadership. Over the past year, we have made significant progress on near-term efforts to better advocate for service members and their families, increase awareness of problem resolution process, and increase involvement of Navy government housing team. We are committed to continuing these improvements moving forward. It is a privilege to testify before the committee today. We are committed to being good stewards of taxpayers' dollars and will invest smartly to drive efficiency and ensure best return of investment for the nation, our sailors, and civilians. I look forward to your questions. Thank you, sir.
General Schiroti.
Chairman Heinrich, Ranking Member Bozeman, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this year's Marine Corps installations and family housing budget. Our installations are critical to the ability to train our forces and maintain readiness. And thanks to the strong support we have received from Congress, the Marine Corps continues to improve the quality and resiliency of its installations infrastructure. I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude for the support provided to rebuild the infrastructure damaged by Hurricane Florence in 2018. The effects of that storm highlighted the need to modernize our infrastructure so that it was more resilient to the effects of extreme weather. We sincerely appreciate your rapid support in providing the resources to restore our facilities on the East Coast. The Marine Corps' FY22 MILCON budget request is for $1.1 billion for 15 projects, 8 projects totaling about $500 million to support the Defense Program Review Initiative, as well as modernization and recapitalization projects. The Marine Corps operates installations and support infrastructure worldwide valued at more than $110 billion. These assets must be properly maintained to prevent degradation of our ability to train and generate readiness for global employment to support our mission essential task. Our installations must be resilient to the wide variety of threats. This resiliency rests in the ability to maintain reliable access to critical functions, such as an effective power grid, clean water distribution, and and communications capabilities. The Marine Corps has undertaken several initiatives to retain this access. For example, at Marine Corps Logistics Base Albany, the Marine Corps' first net zero installation, and at Marine Corps Recruit Depot Paris Island and Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. We also are conducting Black Start exercises earlier this year, which shows our independence from the commercial grid and our ability to operate at an extended period of time off of the grid. The Marine Corps is undergoing a significant transition in how it is organized, trained, and equipped to meet the current and evolving threats from our peer adversaries. The future force will have new capabilities whose installations requirements are difficult to fully determine at present. The Marine Corps continue to evaluate the facilities requirement of this force. As the service's experimentation efforts continues, these new requirements for support and protection will come into greater focus. Finally, the quality of life of our Marines and sailors and their families is integral to the effectiveness of the force. The overall goal of Military Family Housing Privatization Program is to provide safe, quality, and affordable housing to our military and Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps views its role in providing these homes as a top priority. In conclusion, the Marine Corps' installations must prove resilient against a variety of threats we face and must modernize our installations to protect our ability to generate combat power in support of our Title X responsibilities. Our operational capabilities are adapting to meet these threat changes, and we need to invest in the next generation of installation infrastructure to sustain the force of the future. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today, your oversight, input, and support as we determine the infrastructure requirements that will best position the Marine Corps for mission accomplishment. I look forward to working with you and to sustain our warfighting capabilities and the readiness of our power projection platforms. Thank you, sir.
General Barry.
Good morning, Chairman Heinrich, Ranking Member Bozeman, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to appear before you today to discuss Air Force military construction and family housing. I'm pleased to tell the subcommittee that the Department's investment in this portfolio returned to historic norms in fiscal year 2022 request. Throughout the last year, we've made great strides in improving our processes to build a more mature and stable MILCON program, ultimately increasing the likelihood of successful award and execution. We anchored on 35% design criteria, created a 2-year program lock to further stabilize the program and optimize planning and design expenditures, and enforced admissibility criteria with requirement owners to ensure only the most ready projects were included in the budget proposal. As a result, our fiscal year 2022 MILCON request of $2.38 billion is a significant step up from fiscal year 2021. As you know, our installations are not only power projection platforms for our many weapon systems and missions, they are also home for many of our airmen, guardians, and their families. And those that don't live on base often rely on the many services those installations provide. Throughout this portfolio, we strive to strike that balance between mission and people so we can continue to provide safe, secure, and resilient bases for both. In that vein, our fiscal year 2022 request includes $637 million for efforts which directly support service members and their families, including housing construction, housing operations and maintenance, privatized housing oversight, as well as new construction of dorms and a child development center. Turning to mission, our MILCON program focuses on 3 key areas. 9 projects worth $431 million supporting modernization of the nuclear triad, specifically ground-based strategic deterrent and the B-21 Raider. 20 projects worth $793 million to support combatant commanders, particularly in Europe and the Pacific, and $229 million for planning and design to ensure continued MILCON execution success going forward. While not part of the fiscal year 2022 request, our enterprise remains heavily invested in natural disaster recovery efforts. The Air Force is extremely thankful to this subcommittee for the support of these efforts. With the $3.6 billion provided in fiscal years 2019 and 2020, the Air Force is rebuilding Tyndall and Offutt Air Force bases in a more efficient and resilient way. The first MILCON project at Tyndall, a child development center, was awarded in September. Design efforts are underway for the rest of the program, and I expect to start seeing additional construction contract awards this summer, with approximately 2/3 of the remaining requirements on contract by the end of the fiscal year. And finally, I'd like to quickly mention our efforts to support the stand-up of the United States Space Force. Though details are still being worked out, the Space Force will continue to leverage current Air Force installation support processes. In fiscal year 2022, the Department transferred facility restoration, modernization, and sustainment, along with unaccompanied housing and facilities operations funds to the Space Force for execution. We then expect MILCON funds to be transferred by fiscal year 2024. For the fiscal year 2022 program build, Space Force MILCON priorities were considered in our existing Department of the Air Force MILCON prioritization process. This portfolio is essential to the health of our vast infrastructure that is not only critical to mission success, but also to the well-being of our airmen, guardians, and their families. We thank this subcommittee for your interest and support, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General Berry. We'll proceed with questions and use the standard 5-minute rounds. Senators will be recognized in the order that they arrived, and I'll start by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. To either General Evans or General Berry, I mentioned in my opening statement that I'm encouraged by the increased requests for ERSIP. However, it's my understanding that the demand for funding still exceeds the request. So, for example, there are microgrid projects ready to go at installations across the country, including at Kirtland Air Force Base and White Sands Missile Range. Could you talk about the interest in ERSIP from installations and the regions, and if there was additional funding, what would the ability to execute be?
Sir, thank you for the question. We're budgeting $104 million this year for ERSIP, which is an increase from last year, and we are also in the out years increasing the use of ERSIP. I can get you those numbers. ERSIP is an important program to us, as well as the other third-party contracts that address climate control and environment. But I can get you the numbers for the out years. We are increasing our use, sir.
So as far as the Air Force, so for resilience, we look at it through several different lenses, through energy, through cyber, infrastructure response when something happens, and of course through climate. From a resilience perspective, I don't have the exact numbers for the ERSIP, unfortunately, for the Air Force. I can certainly take that for the record to get back to you for particular projects that we have in the budget for the 22 request. But as you know, and I think as both you and Senator Bozeman mentioned, the challenges that we have, right, are the many demands on the portfolio. And so the many things that we try to fit into the top line and the obligation authority that we do have in the department can't satisfy all the demands that are there. Right. But it is important to us. We are committed to resilience. We have, as I mentioned in my opening comments, with Tyndall and Offutt, many of the projects there in terms of building those facilities and bases back to what we need, not just what was there before, by incorporating resilience and incorporating all those resilience standards into our design standards moving forward for future MILCON and restoration and modernization is very, very important to us.
Admiral Williamson or General Schiroti, the FY22 ERSIP unfunded requirements list does not include any Navy or Marine Corps projects. Do the 4 Navy and single Marine Corps projects in the budget request reflect the entirety of ERSIP demand in those services?
Sir, FY22 included $109 million for 9 ERSIP projects. Giving an example of those, one is Great Lakes, Illinois, our single training facility, and the other is in Atsugi. Additionally, one of those projects we took advantage of not only the resilience that my counterparts talked about, but on San Clemente Island, which is very important to our training. We were able to get wind turbines up there, which allowed us to get away from using diesel generators. It's a very important part of our base master plans, and we validate that through our mission assurance program by going out, looking at the infrastructure of the base, ensuring that it can respond to any loss of power, and also that we're producing the most efficient use of the power.
Yeah, General Schiroti, do you want to add to that?
Sure, thank you. So from the Marine Corps perspective, we have, across our installations, we have undertaken an assessment analysis of where we stand with our ability to maintain the resiliency that's needed to operate our core functions. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, some of our installations now are at net zero and are able to generate that utility that's required in order to sustain the functions, and in some cases also sell back utilities. So we find great value across the board. We continue to make those investments, but we're moving at a very deliberate and informed pace through our analysis that's being provided there. You'll see in San Diego, MCRD San Diego, where we are pairing up with commercial utilities provided for a long-term power sustainment independence in that regard. So from the Marine Corps perspective, yes, sir, we are taking max advantage of that. Thank you.
It's been interesting as we've worked through some of these projects in New Mexico, where we have a microgrid project at Kirtland Air Force Base. You know, we start to realize that we've heavily relied on things like diesel generators, which, you know, 1 out of 3 times you try to get them started and they just don't start. And replacing those with on-grid storage has made quite a difference. So look forward to hearing more, and with that, I will recognize our ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kramer, the past couple of years, your office has been working on military construction reform, looking for ways to reduce cost and improve timeliness of delivery by looking at specific key areas of the MILCON process. I didn't see any mention of that effort in your written statement. Again, we had a really good visit in the office and talked about these things. So can you just reaffirm what MILCON is thinking about in regard to initiatives that are focusing on producing real change and results for the MILCON program in that regard? Can you share any specific examples of process improvements you've identified and are working towards from an enterprise-wide approach? Thank you. For one of our service witnesses, if you'll just jump in, this applies to all of you very quickly. There's been a lot of attention in recent years to the condition of not just housing, but also barracks and dormitories. We've seen multiple stories of barracks and Storms in poor condition, sometimes against the backdrop of low morale, poor command climates, and troubling stories. Most of you addressed this in your written and oral statements, but I'd like to address it here. How are you prioritizing funding for barracks and dorms within the Milcon budget, as well as against other quality of life projects such as child development centers? Yes, sir.
I'll go first. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, sir, under the G9, we lead a Quality of Life Task Force for the Army. We've been leading that since about November 19. And there's 6 lines of efforts, really 6 priorities that were really based on the Chief of Staff of the Army's transition task force, where they canvassed the Army, talked to privates all the way up to generals, talked to civilians, talked to family members. And what came out of that is the number one priority for people, which is our number one priority, is housing. And included in that is barracks. And I think our budget request reflects that. You'll see 5 barracks projects in there. One also includes a reserve component. With your support, the Chief of Staff's FY22 UFR list, there's about 13 barracks projects in there. And the third priority in that was child development centers. And you'll see 4 child development center projects in the UFR list, 2 CDC Milcon projects and 2 R&M projects, and you'll see the same in our request. And so that's how we look at it. Our priorities are people, modernization, and readiness. And I think that our budget request and our UFR request reflects that.
Good. Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Williamson, as you may know, the acting Secretary of the Navy recently visited the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine. He was clearly very impressed with what he saw there, the outstanding, talented, highly skilled employed. We have an excellent captain commanding the shipyard, and the entire Maine delegation and New Hampshire delegation are strongly supportive of the shipyard. The Navy's budget requests $250 million for the second increment of the multi-mission Dry Dock Number 1 extension project at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. The Navy has included as its number 1 Milcon unfunded priority an additional $225 million that's needed to keep this essential project on schedule. It is vitally important, beginning in 2024, scheduled Virginia-class maintenance availabilities at the shipyard will exceed its capacity, and failure to complete this project on time will result in 20 deferred availabilities through 2040. In other words, we need this project completed in time, or we risk our submarines and our sailors being unable to accomplish their mission. Could you discuss the importance of the additional funding to the success of the project? And with this additional funding, number 1 on your unfunded priority list, would the Navy be able to eliminate the 20 deferred availabilities so that we can return our submarines and our sailors to the fleet on schedule so they can perform their important mission?
Yes, ma'am. First, yesterday, the CNO testified this is a once-in-a-century opportunity. The shipyards play a very vital role. I am very familiar with Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, as you know, as a commander of Navy Region Mid-Atlantic. The shipyards, our dry docks are over 100 years old. The infrastructure that supports is greater than 61 years old. It is vital to support of Columbia and Virginia-class submarines, particularly for COCOM requirements. We did have a project that came in over what we expected. So I think it was a tremendous opportunity for us to learn because we have not done a mega project this size in a very long time. Our leadership has absolutely, with a sense of urgency, said we need to learn quicker, and we will. Raw materials, for example, the impact, the volatility due to COVID, driving that up. Balancing the maintenance of building a new shipyard while you're doing maintenance to a very complex platform. Ensuring that those maintenance availabilities are predictable and on time allows you to maintain that superior workforce that's in Portsmouth. We're committed to learning from that. We have taken several actions. Obviously, taking on a task of this size requires great expertise, so we're bringing on cost engineers and economists, experts to help us. We're also bringing in third-party risk consultants to get better accuracy and reduce the risk as we move forward. In addition to that, it kind of ties into the resilience conversation we had earlier. The first element of this is a digital twin. We are currently looking at all 4 of our shipyards. Hawaii is completed. We hope to have the digital twins completed by the end of this year for all of our shipyards. What that'll allow us to do is do an area development plan.
But just to clarify, you stand by the statement that's in the budget materials that the additional money would eliminate the 20 deferred maintenances.
Yes, ma'am.
April, I was just going to say, can everyone please make sure your mics are on and pull them in nice and tight so that the folks who are watching on the website can hear you as well.
Roger that, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. General Evans, I was pleased to see that the Army's budget request includes $21 million for a new joint vehicle maintenance shop for the Maine National Guard at its Saco location. The existing undersized facility was constructed more than 80 years ago, and it has a host of problems, including insufficient lighting, poor ventilation, fire mitigation, and electrical wiring that's not up to code, asbestos in the structure, and there are also force protection issues with the current building. What would be the impact of a delay in replacing this facility on readiness?
Well, ma'am, all the reasons you stated, an antiquated facility, it doesn't have the room.
Can you make sure your mic's all the way in?
Sorry, sir.
There you go.
All those reasons you stated, along with that being the only vehicle maintenance facility in Bloomington of its kind, it's also a shared facility with the Air National Guard as well as the Army National Guard, will have a tremendous impact on the readiness of maintenance on combat and tactical vehicles.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you. I think we're going to start a second round, and I believe Senator Tester may be on his way as well. So I want to ask you, Mr. Kramer, this is the first year that DoD has requested funding for electric vehicle infrastructure planning and design. It's critical that the department commit resources to understand its energy demand needs and electrical grid capacity and to build out its electric infrastructure where necessary. Could you discuss how the department is approaching electrification at installations, in particular to support both the non-tactical and the tactical vehicle fleet?
Sure, Senator, I would start that, but it goes back to I didn't want to be accused of a spring butt to the question you asked earlier about ERSIP, and really the plan starts with our installation energy plans, and so if we have a holistic plan of energy needs on an installation, a subset of that would be the grid, resilience of the grid, electrification of the grid in order to provide electricity to the point of need, regardless of what that point is, electric vehicles, command facilities. And then also what we want to do as part of our installation energy plan is build in efficiency into those facilities so that we could reduce the demand, which then increases the O&M dollars to spread out. And so specifically for electric vehicles and electrification to support and focus on the non-tactical, we're years away from electrification of a tactical vehicle. So non-tactical vehicles on an installation, we really have to look at the point of need, and the sufficiency of the grid, so we don't throw our whole electric system off balance. So we really have to then hire some folks that are experts in the field, which quite frankly we don't have that muscle memory within our organizations just yet. We may build that capacity, but right now we're really going to rely on some consultants to come back into an installation and say, all right, so here's what the grid looks like today. Here's kind of the direction we're going to go, and we're going to make sure it fits into our overall installation energy plan, and then we use the tools in the toolkit in order to address a lot of that, ERSIP being one of those. And I think what you'll find is that while the FIDIP for an ERSIP doesn't look that deep today, as we fill out the installation energy plans across the entire Department of Defense, then that one-to-N list does get fairly robust because the need is there to support resilience on our installations. That's what we're really looking for. How do we continue to operate regardless of the events that take place and eliminate those single points of failure that exist today in our grid?
About that, I follow my own advice here. Is the department integrating electrification requirements into upfront facility design? For example, are you updating the unified facilities criteria to think about these things so that we're not down the road retrofitting expensively? And a lot of what you talked about in your testimony just now, it's not really rocket science. I've been doing this I built my first electric vehicle in the early 90s, and I've been driving electric for a few years now. And oftentimes, it is cheaper if you plan for it. It's not cheaper if you retrofit. So, for example, if you have a new office building or if you have a new housing and you put in the smallest service panel available when you build that, if you add additional demand, you're going to have to make an expensive upgrade. Whereas if you put a service panel in that has additional slots in it, it's not a big deal. So are you making the shift to thinking about this into the future and planning so you're avoiding expensive upgrades down the road?
Yes, Senator. We have updated our unified facilities criteria, our version of design codes, and our facilities guides that we give out to, or that our design construction agents use to give out to their architect and engineers. So those guide specs and facility criteria codes have been updated. And so what we're not in the habit of doing is retrofitting buildings for retrofit's sake. We're going to go into a facility that has a need for more than just one single item to correct. We'll do that restoration modernization, and we'll put in all of the latest and greatest at that time of contract. But we've got hundreds of thousands of facilities we've got to get to, and so we're really then focusing on the retrofit as we go down. I'll let my service colleagues add in if they want.
Sir, to address the question specifically, as Mr. Kramer mentioned, as part of our installation development plans and part of our mission assurance reviews of our bases, it's twofold. The UFC standard, as we move to look at resiliency moving forward, and this being part of our master plan, we specifically look at the bases with grids, for example, to ensure that when we build back better, and that is built with two things in mind. One, the efficiency of the base, which is a multiplier for us, and two, allows us resilience. I had the great fortune of being the CEO of Naval Base San Diego, had a great partnership with San Diego Gas and Electric, and obviously huge demand signals in that area. But when you have the partnerships with the local energy providers, it's a tremendous opportunity and leverage for us to learn. So certain times of the year in San Diego, Naval Base San Diego is home to 50 or more ships, huge energy consumption. We come onto ship's power to allow San Diego the same opportunity they allow us to operate. And so through those partnerships, I think it's tremendous learning, and it's also an operational advantage for us.
Great. Thank you. Senator Hagerty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with such distinguished witnesses today, and in particular, a very good friend, General Chuck Sciarrotti. It's wonderful to see you again, Chuck. And Chuck, I'm going to direct some questioning to you, if you don't mind. I want to go back and talk about the 2018 National Defense Strategy and quote from that. China wants to shape a world consistent with its authoritarian model, gaining veto authority over other nations' economic, diplomatic, and security decisions. In pursuit of that objective, each day, China continues to strengthen its posture in the Indo-Pacific region. It continues to maintain a very real threat to the United States and to our allies. And that's why the U.S. military posture in the Indo-Pacific region is more important than ever. As ambassador to Japan, it was my great honor to work alongside you, General Shirati, and such a competent team of United States military professionals in that region. And we continued to focus our posture to be as effective as we could be every day. So I'd like to get your perspective. If you could describe the strategic environment in the Indo-Pacific today, as it stands today, and whether China is continuing to tilt the balance of power in its favor.
Senator Hagerty, it's good to see you, sir. Sir, I will stay within my lane, and that is within the area of logistics and facilities, and also of the United States Marine Corps. Our Commandant has put the Marine Corps on a footing to address the threat that China is. In that regard, he has directed a force design which really seeks to address the growing risk that China has placed on the United States and as defined by the National Defense Strategy. To that end, we are, as we always do when faced with a threat, reevaluating our posture to ensure that we are able to provide the Indo-Pacific commander and the nation the responsiveness that the United States Marine Corps is expected to deliver, sir.
Well, I want to thank you and the many Marines that serve in that region. In my experience with China, the past couple of decades, they've increased their military expenditure some eightfold. And recently, they just surpassed the number of ships in their fleet greater than the U.S. military's fleet. Now, of course, our ships are far more capable and a real force in that region. But as you continue to think about our posture there, do you think of us moving in a more dispersed fashion? Do you think of us hardening our position? How do you see, from a facility standpoint, that evolving given the breadth of the challenge in that region?
As you well know, sir, our installations in the Indo-Pacific AOR are located within the first island chain, the majority of those. And so we continually look at the vulnerabilities that we face, both from environmental as well as kinetic threats from our potential adversaries. To that end, the United States Marine Corps is an expeditionary force, and so we see ourselves operating in a very dispersed manner within that first island chain, providing that competition, deterrent, and the ability to quickly transition from competition to the blunt force as directed within the National Defense Strategy, sir.
Well, I want to thank you for everything that you've done in your career and service, Chuck, and I want to let you know that were it not for the strength that you provide, our diplomacy would not be as effective as it is. So thank you, and thanks to all of our witnesses today. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Bozeman for having this hearing. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here. And Senator Hagerty, I look forward to working with you. You laid out the challenges very, very well, both from a military perspective and an infrastructure perspective in this country. So thank you for those statements. Okay, last year the National Guard has been called to respond to COVID-19, domestic unrest, and even to secure where we're at right here today. One of the only major MILCON accounts that saw a significant decrease in the budget request was the Army National Guard MILCON account. We're relying on our National Guard more than ever, and I'm concerned that we're going to reward them by asking them to do more with less. So, General Evans, can you tell us about what kind of risks that we're taking by funding the Army National Guard MILCON at the level it's requested?
Sir, thank you for the question. The MILCON budget, to include the Army National Guard, is based on the Army priorities, people, and readiness and modernization. I think what you see in the Army National Guard MILCON account budget request is addressing those items, barracks, vehicle maintenance, as well as readiness center. You also see a number of projects with your support in the Chief of Staff UFR list for the same barracks, readiness centers, and maintenance to address exactly what you're talking about, sir, the readiness of the Army National Guard.
So just to follow up very quickly, General Evans, you don't think we're taking any risk by having the National Guard MILCON funded at this level? You think it's adequate?
So I think the Army senior leaders, as they prioritize the MILCON list, considered the risk across all compos, sir. And I think what you have is it addresses the people in readiness and modernization for all compos to include the Army National Guard, sir.
So this is adequate?
So I would say, with your support with the Chief of Staff, the Army's UFR list, I think we will continue to make ground on that. Okay. As you know, the Army does have an infrastructure backlog, and I think the UFR list, along with what we're doing now, addresses that, and we will continue to address that based on Army priorities, sir.
Okay. General Berry, we've got Malmstrom Air Force Base in my backyard. We've got a potential weapons storage facility to be built there, as well as one in Senator Hovind's state and in Wyoming. I believe they've started on the one in Wyoming. They're supposed to start on the one in Montana soon, I think. It's well funded, but there has been somewhat of a history of kicking the can down the road a bit. And I want to make sure it doesn't get kicked down the road on the weapons storage facility. So, to cut to the chase, can you give me a time frame about when you think, because it is somewhat dependent on Wyoming, but when you think they'll break ground on the Montana weapons storage facility?
Yeah, Senator, thanks for the question. So, as you said, as we do the construction at F.E. Warren, we're learning lessons as we go along. There have been some design changes from those lessons we learned at F.E. Warren that we're now incorporating into the weapons generation facility at Malmstrom. We are proceeding to 95% design on the Malmstrom weapons generation facility. Right now, talking to our design and construction agent, we believe that we'll be ready for a contract award in the spring of 2022. So once we do contract award, then you can start doing the mobilization and you can start doing the actual construction at that site. So for now, we have the $120 million first increment for that structure and that very, very complicated facility. We think that's enough money for now to carry us through FY22 to get to the more robust design and get us through contract awards, sir.
So a year from now, actually a little before that, because we're in June now, so spring is, at least in Montana, we're in summer, even though calendar doesn't state it.
Yes, sir.
The contract award will be given.
That is the current schedule that we are marching to, yes, sir.
And what point in time after that contract award does dirt start being moved?
I can get back to you on the exact time frame.
Typically, how long does it take?
It's months later.
Months.
By the time you mobilize the contractor and get them on site, yes, sir.
Appreciate that, and I'll probably hold you to it too. So thank you. On privatized housing, I'm out of time. I'll submit a question for the record, Mr. Chairman. I just want to express my appreciation to all of you for the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tester. Senator Hovind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pick up right where Senator Tester left off. No surprise to him. We have common interest both in weapons generation facility and also the MH-139 facility, and we've worked very hard on both of those, including the helicopter, getting the new helicopter out to the ICBM bases. And so he mentioned Malmstrom. I'm going to bring up the Minor Air Force Base. General Berry, can you update me as to the status for the well, let's start with the MH-139 facility. We appropriated, $66 million in 19, additional 5.5 in 20 to house that facility. I've been expecting that you all would have had a groundbreaking by now. So can you update me on the status of constructing that facility?
Yes, sir. So it's a similar story to the last question Senator Tester asked. As we put the bids out, the bids came in higher than anticipated. And so our construction agent right now is evaluating those bids to try to see if we can get it more in line with what we expected that project to cost. Since it is right now in solicitation, I'm hesitant to say anything publicly. I think we'd be more than happy to come talk to you privately about some of the challenges that we're seeing on that MH-139 facility. We do know that once the Corps of Engineers does award the contract, it'll be about a 2-year period of performance to actually get the facility completed. But until we can get through the bids, I can't give you a firm answer on when that construction will actually start.
Well, then I would ask that you come talk to me privately so I do know when that's going to be. All right? Thank you. But then also I want to ask you about the weapons generation facility. Unlike F.E. Warren or Malmstrom, we have both the ICBM ground-based nuclear deterrent, but also the B-52s with the nuclear weapons. So we've been told that we haven't been started on the new weapons generation facility because we have you have to handle both aircraft and missiles, and the others are just the missiles. I understand that. I still want to know where we're at in getting that done. I mean, this is the only dual nuclear base in the country operating with an older facility. So it seems to me it's of great importance. Can you tell me on the timeline there?
Yeah, so Senator, I unfortunately can't commit to a specific date of when we'll get to that weapons generation facility. I think as you alluded to, right, it is very, very complicated. The WGFs themselves are complicated and complex facilities when you design in all the safety and surety standards that come with that weapon system. We're learning lessons at F.E. Warren. We'll learn some lessons when we get to Malmstrom. This fiscal year 22 budget, increment 1 for the Barksdale weapons generation facilities in there. That's the first bomber WGF that we will design and build as well. So all of those are giving us an opportunity to learn the lessons that will then come to play at Minot, where, as you mentioned, we are putting both of these missions together into one facility. That makes it even more complex than the other ones. So we think by doing that, we'll get a better design, we'll get a better cost estimate, and we have a better chance of meeting cost and schedule when we do it that way. But right now, we have not started the detailed design on that structure.
But you're also building weapons generation facilities for the new B-21 at Ellsworth and Dias, I think, and somewhere else. So I keep getting told this, we're going to learn a lot of lessons, but I'm quite anxious to understand when we're going to get going on this facility. So maybe that's something we could talk about as well.
Absolutely, sir. We have a plan for the weapons generation facilities as they come online based on mission need for the missions that are going to the various bases. So we'd be happy to come talk to you in more detail about the Minot project.
This is the only base in the nation with a dual nuclear mission, performing at a high level, strategically important base for ICBMs, and a B-52 deployment that's very, very high for both the Korean Peninsula and the Middle East. High ops tempo. These soldiers are doing, these airmen and women are doing a whale of a job out of that facility, and it really does deserve the attention.
Sir, we agree with you at the importance of the mission, and we are committed to replace the weapons storage area with the WGF.
Thank you. I guess on the positive front, I would tell you, at least from the funding standpoint, it looks to me like we're keeping the new GBSD, ground-based strategic deterrent, as well as the LRSO on schedule, which has been no small effort on the part of this appropriating committee. So just any thoughts you have there are incredibly important as far as part of the nuclear triad. We're committed to it. We're working very hard to do that. And I know our chairman here is very committed to the nuclear lab piece since he has part of that in his state. Any thoughts as far as staying on schedule with those?
So the GBSD, I know that we have been very, very grateful to the Congress for giving us some authorizations there that will help us do the very, very complicated. When we talk about WGFs being complicated, GBSD, where you're essentially going to replace a silo a week for 8 years, is going to be a very complicated endeavor as well. So we're very grateful for the authorities we've gotten from Congress, and I think those authorities that we have received at least set us on the path to realizing the goal of staying on cost and on budget for the GBSD transition.
Thank you, General. Thank you not only for what you do, and to all of you here gathered. Thank you for we truly appreciate you very much, and thank you for all that you do for us.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here this morning, for your leadership. I want to talk about housing today. I had an opportunity just this morning to meet the new incoming Commander General Eifler. He's going to be taking over for General Andresiak, who's been doing a great job for us in Alaska. And and one of the issues that he and I have shared just a great deal, quite honestly, of anxiety and stress over is what we have seen in the increasing rate of suicide in Alaska, particularly within the Army. Just really very, very disturbing, and as General Andresiak has used the term, it's heartbreaking. So we're trying to address these issues, and you're trying to look to what are the contributing factors? What's happening out there? Is it deployments? What is it? And it seems that so much of it comes back to some of the quality of life issues, and how we are able to support our soldiers, our airmen, our Marines, how we are there for them. And housing is kind of a basic thing. So we want to make sure that we're doing right in all of these spaces. We're really quite pleased that in Alaska we're seeing a plus up in terms of the military personnel that is coming specifically to Eielson, but also at Fort Wainwright. This is up in the interior of the state. Owing to the F-35 bed down, Eielson's expected to receive 54 jets, an additional 1,300 military personnel, plus their families by December of 2021. By 2023, Eielson will receive 4 more KC-135s and more than 200 active duty Air Force personnel, plus their families. We are really excited about it. The Alaska delegation certainly is, but also the communities up north. Those in the Fairbanks North Star Borough, where Eielson is located, have been enthusiastic in every sense of the word. But they've also been a little bit concerned about how do we make sure that we truly are that Golden Heart community where we not only welcome all of our military and their families, but how do we make sure that they're well cared for? And so we have a housing issue in the region, just more largely, but on-base housing availability at both Eielson and Fort Wainwright are about 95% capacity. That's right now. And to my knowledge, there's no ongoing construction, planned construction, or funding requests for the creation of on-base housing. And I think it's important to say this is what everyone had agreed to. I'm not laying the onus on anybody here, but it was going to be necessary for the community to know that they weren't going to make that investment on the private side, build things, and then have Air Force come in and build housing that would put the investments on the private side at risk. We've been down that road before, and the community wasn't at all interested in doing that. So what we're trying to do is make this work for everyone. Nearly all of these incoming personnel are going to live in the community, and again, right now we've got housing issues within the community at large. In addition to the number of units, there's been a recent housing assessment that found that 36% of households are cost burdened, meaning that they spend more than 30% of their income on housing, and this is due to a number of factors. It's cold climate, it's aging homes, it's more expensive. So that's a long question. I spent 5 minutes outlining this, which I shouldn't have, because I need your input here. And Mr. Kramer, this is probably for you, but General Barry, General Evans, I'd certainly welcome your input on this. What is happening within DOD, notably the Air Force and the Army, to partner with the community to identify and implement solutions to make sure that we're getting airmen and their families into these homes and at an affordable rate? So that's a very broad question to you, but know that we are very, very concerned that the timing on all this matches the incoming number of personnel. So, Mr. Kramer, it looks like you're ready to go.
Yes, Senator. I'll start it off. Yeah. So I haven't served in the Army and as a Deputy Assistant Secretary for a number of years. I'm very familiar with the housing program in the North Star Borough, both at Eielson and at Fort Wainwright. Capacity issue is definitely a challenge, especially in the larger homes where we see a lot of the military families have more kids. And so in the 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, there's a good inventory, but 4 or 5 bedrooms there's not. And so with the Army, it has kept online Birchwood family housing, even though it far exceeded both the in-lease and the out-lease for that project. So we've kept it online just because it had the larger homes, and have partnered with the community to try to entice development of housing off-post. Because in the Department of Defense, our priority is still community-first housing, not on-base housing. So to the extent we give assurances to the local construction housing developers, we're willing to do that so that they can spur some construction on. And Senator, I'm concerned about the 36% house burden number that you cited, because that, if it's military folks, we can do better in our basic allowance for housing surveys that we do annually to set the rates. Because what we don't want to do is burden our soldiers and airmen and having to spend more on a house, because then it comes directly out of the rest of their household budget, and we're very concerned about, because that leads to what you started this conversation on. I'll turn it over to General Berry and General Evans.
Senator, I think Mr. Kramer hit all the points that I would have hit. I know that we are tracking the concern. We are talking to the local leadership there so we can really understand the details behind it, so then we know how we can come in and help them as required. But we are tracking it, and we continue to work with the local community to try to find some creative solutions.
Know that we appreciate that. We will look forward to partnering very closely with you as the months proceed here. I will share just one factor that I picked up at a roundtable that I did with military spouses a couple years ago when we were talking about base housing allowance, and a recognition that in Fairbanks, in the area, you have many homes that are not on city water. So there's an additional fee to have your septic pumped. There's an additional fee for water delivery. And those are not, or at least at the time, were not incorporated as part of that allowance. So things like that we can look to creatively, I think, help with these financial stressors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Heinrich's like the rest of us. We've all got three of these going on that are so important, with such really important witnesses like yourself talking about some really important topics that are going on. But I'd like to just ask a real quick question, because I think it's important, and follow up on Senator Haggerty, and maybe a couple of the other service witnesses can jump in. The request that we have does not include investments in Pacific deterrence initiatives that we were expecting to see. While the President's budget includes $5.1 billion in funding to support the effort, none of it is for MILCON. What is your role in the PDI funding process? Does the PDI tagged MILCON go through traditional MILCON decision-making processes, or are we treating it differently somehow? We'll end on an easy question.
Senator.
But it is a very important question.
It is a very important question, and so it goes back to our earlier discussion about project development of MILCON projects, and so we have sat through some classified briefings to understand, where we intend to go with PDI, and I will just tell you that I think we're still early to need on developing those projects within a budget year. And what we don't want to do is get so far ahead of our headlights that we identify projects in a specific country that we don't have necessarily an agreement with to do any construction, and then with languages for a number of years. We've learned that lesson in the not so recent past in Europe. And so we want to get all those stars aligned, get the project defined, get the host nation agreements, and then go forward with those projects. And but it is in the works.
No, we appreciate that, and that's very reassuring. Again, thank you all for being here today. We appreciate you for taking the time to again talk about this very important subject. Also, for the senators participating in today's hearing, I look forward to working closely with you to address the military construction and family housing needs facing us, and I say that on behalf of the entire committee. Finally, we will keep the hearing open for a week. Committee members who would like to submit written questions for the record should do so by 5 p.m. Wednesday, June the 23rd. We appreciate the department responding to them in a reasonable period of time. And with that, we stand adjourned.